Hello, Eric and Loava, and welcome to the Women Awaken podcast.
Hello.
It's wonderful to be here.
So exciting to have you both. This is my first duo on the show, which is really neat.
Yeah, well, hopefully we have enough to talk about here. We're a bit long-winded and we tend to give long interviews, so we have a lot of information for you between the two of us for sure.
Yeah, we're excited to be here. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, you have some incredible topics and that I can't wait to hear more about. So talk away. I'm excited to hear from you both. So I do want to welcome you, and I'm so glad that we connected. We connected on this new platform called Audrey, which is it seems like a network for podcasters.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like a LinkedIn for podcasters. It's great for connecting, and I encourage any podcast hosts who are out there, check it out. We are not paid by Audrey, by the way.
No, but it's just wonderful. It's just a wonderful platform because you connect with people you would not or in other ways connect. So it's nice.
Yeah, exactly. And it's AUDRY, not the EY. I know that my dog's name is Audrey, but hers
it was fate.
I know, that's what I thought. Okay, so first I'd like to just have you both introduce yourselves. And you both are in partnership, so maybe just share about that you guys work together, and then what is the work that you're doing. You guys run the Spirit World Center, and you both have strong connections with shamanism, which you're going to talk a lot about. And it sounds like you guys do some, events and rituals around that. And then you also are into the paranormal. So these are all things we're going to talk about. And I'd love for you to share what that looks like right now in regards to your life and your work.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, the Spirit World Center, we are co-founders of it. And absolutely right, we are partners in life and pretty much inseparable. And so we operate the Spirit World Center, which is this place where people can come to learn how to interact with the spirit world through various modalities, right? One thing we say is, different temperaments and talents require different techniques. And so one thing, of course, we teach is shamanism. We have an apprenticeship program in shamanism taught by both of us. And in that, we teach people over 18 months how to develop their shamanic abilities so that they can do things like shamanic journeying, which is entering a trance state in order to work with the spirit world in kind of a lucid dream-like situation. So we do that. We also offer a program on learning to work with the spirit world in kind of more of a ceremonial way, where you're making offerings, giving gifts, and creating that connection with the local spiritual ecosystem around you and with your own guides and all this. So those are some of the things that we do at the center. And then a big part of what we do also is basically education and basically kind of getting the word out there to the public about the spirit world, to dispel some of the fears and the myths, but also to create kind of a clearer understanding, right?
We advocate for the spirits. We do.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of these things where it's like when people are going into houses and they're clearing them, and it's like, oh, everything is demons, and then they send, and our response is, well, you know what, some ghosts are just the little old lady who's sticking around, and like you're just you're being quite cruel to them when you treat them like this malefic force, right? So we do some kind of spirit-based advocacy, but then we also teach people how to deal with a haunted house ethically, and in a way that that preserves your rights and boundaries and those of the spirit. So that's we wear many hats at the center. But anything to add on that?
I think it's pretty complete. I mean, we have other plans that are to come. Since which we want to have a course about more the body trance that are based on the creation. It's based on the sculpture of ancient civilization, and how it's not just for decoration, but actually the posture that they are showing induce trance for specific like healing purposes. So that's something we're working on right now. But it's all towards the purpose of what we're doing. It's towards healing, but also having a sense of connection with something, bigger than you, and, connection with the unseen world. So it brings meaning to your life, and you can like have guidance and so on. That's
Yeah,
what I would say.
we also have another channeling course in the works, channeling and mediumship, that once again, it's a different approach to connecting with that unseen realm, right? So so with that said, maybe it's good to jump into just what is shamanism and what we're talking about here when we're talking about working with the spirit world, right? Yeah. So ultimately, shamanism is this ancient technique, right? It's one of the oldest spiritual impulses known to humanity. It goes back millennia, right? It goes back to the earliest of humans. And it's based on this natural ability that all humans have. We're born with it. It's our birthright. And that is the ability to enter trance. And it's this neurological thing that happens. But when we enter into trance, we're able to access parts of reality that would normally be hidden from us.
Yes, and by trance, entering a trance is, just a non-ordinary state of mind, a meditative state of mind. So you have the day-to-day state of mind. When we say trance, you're not necessarily like shaking and having the eyes going on and so on. That's one type of trance. You can go, that heavy, but there's other trance when you just feel like your mind is aside, and you're connecting with what is deep within you. You're with your core, and you feel yourself, but you feel the space around you. And so we're talking about this being at your core, and that's the trance, instead of being day-to-day filtering what's going on in the day. Mm-hmm.
And shamanic practitioners have used many different techniques to access that trance state over the millennia. Of course, the use of hallucinogens and entheogens, but also, trials of endurance, like dancing around a fire for, 3 days until they collapse, or going without food and water, all these, even kind of ritualistic poisonings where you cause so much pain in the body that you dissociate. But of course, these tend to be a bit more dangerous than we would advise for our students. And we certainly don't endorse them. What we find, though, is that drumming really works.
Yes.
And this is because what you're trying to induce is this neurological change in the body. And a drum beat of around 210 beats per minute has that effect. And, it puts you into that hypnotic trance state. And then you can access different parts of reality. And the thing about that trance state is that, it really is something that is not unique to humans, right? I like to mention that you can hypnotize a chicken. You basically, they have like contests on how long you can keep it hypnotized. You put the beak down on the ground, and then you take a piece of chalk and you slowly draw in a straight line away from the beak. And it will just be enraptured by that line and in a non-ordinary state of consciousness for like half an hour. And that's where the competition comes from. So, even animals can enter that trance state. And so it really is just this neurological change, but that doesn't mean it's not putting you in contact with something bigger, much bigger. And so what is that much bigger, right? So your early shamans, back in the earliest days of human civilization and pre-civilization, they were sitting around the fire. They were, maybe entering these non-ordinary states, and they were connecting with this spiritual ecosystem that was around them that was normally hidden. And the reason why it's hidden from us most of the time, we find, is how the brain acts as a filtering mechanism, right? So the brain is very efficient. It basically, there's so much data out there when it comes to the world around you. When you're walking through the forest, right, there's every leaf, there's every little sound, there's every gradation and the level of the ground, right? You look at a single leaf and there's almost an infinite amount of information just contained within it, right? And so from a survival standpoint, right, if you were getting caught up in all that data, you're going to get eaten. Right. So what the brain does, and it became very efficient at this over time, was it focuses on particular data, right? So it's going to focus on what looks good to eat and also what wants to eat me. Right. And so it's focusing on these things and it's become very efficient at that. Right. But the thing is, that means that 99.9999% of the data that's actually out there, it actually doesn't process. It doesn't look at, it doesn't bring your awareness to it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that stuff is just useless information, right? So you imagine walking through a city and getting off the subway, and like all the people, all their faces, all the fashion choices that they made that day, all the cracks in the sidewalk. We can disregard this because it's not essential. But at the same time, it's apparent to us that we are also factoring out spirit world. We're factoring out unseen forces that would ordinarily that wouldn't play a big survival role in our life unless you purposely reach out to them and start to interact with them. And so when you enter into that trance state, you are turning off the filtering mechanism of the brain, and you are accessing a more pure awareness of what is around you. Right. So that's what shamanism is. It's really entering into a trance in order to interact with the spirit world.
Yeah.
And there's, many ways to do it, but shamanism is one of those terms where we use it because people know what it means, right? It has some cachet. Anthropologists have been using it for hundreds of years. But ultimately, what we're talking about is, trance entering spirit talkers. That's what we're talking about here, and that's what we teach in our shamanic apprenticeship program. And so, I guess before I hand over to you, one thing I'd mention is that working with the spiritual ecosystem around us, right? It really is a spiritual ecosystem. And we find through our experience that you are surrounded by spirits constantly, right? And, some of these, of course, can be disembodied humans, right? So ghosts, that type of thing. But at the same time, there's so many beings, so much consciousness around you that is completely alien, completely foreign, that is very, very different from us. But it exists in this web, this ecosystem that surrounds us, right? You're in your room alone right now, but you're not really alone. You're surrounded by tons of consciousness, not ghosts, human ghosts per se, but yeah, exactly. Looking around now, right? And just like any ecosystem, right? You walk into the forest, and you expect to be surrounded by life, right? You have the microbes in the soil, you have the fungi, the mushrooms, you have the squirrels, you have the deer, you have the trees, you have the plants. But the thing is, one thing that we like to highlight, right, is that you go through life, you have to realize that it's a very full ecosystem, and so there are predators and parasites out there as well. And so, things like in the forest, you'd have mosquitoes, you'd have leeches, right? These things that aren't necessarily evil in any way, but they are a little annoying to us humans. They can draw down our energy and this kind of thing. And so to us, it's very important to educate people on the fact that they live in this ecosystem. They can connect. And so they can equally connect with these positive beings and enrich their life by bringing these energies and these consciousnesses into their lives for guidance, for help, for all these things. And then they can also learn to protect themselves from anything negative, right? One thing that Loava here is incredibly sensitive to spiritual energies. Yeah. And of course, when we started dating, one thing that we found is that if we went to an antique store, right, we'd have a fight the next day. And it was one of these things where it's like, okay, we finally learned. It's like, we didn't cleanse after we left that place, after we left the antique store. We didn't cleanse what we got. We didn't. And, you have so much, first off, psychic residue that gets on anything that comes from a person, right? Mm-hmm. And then also you think, okay, any antique store, any thrift store, a lot of the time, the original owner of that is deceased, right? So you have that kind of energy that attaches. You might even have bits of consciousness on it. And at the same time, any kind of parasitic beings that was on that other person might come with it. Right. Yeah. So this is an example of the type of thing that you start to notice when you realize, okay, there is a unseen ecosystem around us, and it offers a lot of possibilities, but also it offers a lot of things that are good to take care of and to keep in mind as we go through life, to protect ourselves and also to empower ourselves. So that's my pitch for shamanism and the spirit world.
Thank you for that. I have so many questions now, just so many things I'm thinking about. First of all, I just love some of the terms you're using that I've never heard. I've never heard the term spiritual ecosystem. Now, I talk a lot on the show about the interconnectedness of everything. And I talk a lot about nature and how nature is such a good analogy for so many things in life, because everything is underneath the surface completely connected. There's nothing in nature, in a forest, that doesn't affect another part of the system. Its root system is just alive and connected. And now I'm having this visual of that everything around us and what we think is just clear air is the spirit realm, consciousness realm, and there's the whole ecosystem there. So what a concept. And of course, what comes to mind is, what you said is that when you learn to sort of connect with it consciously, it can really, I imagine, be a pretty transformative experience. Yet, most of us move through this world so recklessly and so, focused just on what we're looking at, what we're doing, that, most people have no idea that there's anything else there. So that just makes me, think about all the things that we're really, sort of gliding over, that we're not even taking advantage of or acknowledging in our field.
Absolutely. Like even the spiritual hygiene, example, right?
Yes.
A lot of people, they go through life basically in the condition of never having taken a bath, right? And so you can imagine, if you never took a bath in life, you're going to be covered in dirt. And let's say then you go to an antique store and you pick up a bit more dirt. You're not even going to notice, because you're just being weighed down by all this dirt from an entire lifetime. But if you start getting into regular spiritual cleansing, and taking care of your spiritual hygiene, just like you'd shower, then you can really empower your life, feel a lot better. Of course, one of the things that ironically happens is that suddenly, when you don't have all that dirt on you anymore, when you go to an antique store or something, you pick something up, you might feel it, because suddenly you notice the little piece of dirt that gets on your head, right?
Yes, you start to notice what belongs to you and what does not belong to you. And so in that way, sometimes you feel like sad or down for no reason, and you're like, what's that? Well, then you can cleanse, and you feel, then you feel better. And it was just something that does not belong to you. And so you're just sending away, you trust that the universe will send this energy somewhere it belongs. So yeah.
Another part of that too is realizing soul loss and your own trauma, right? And
so one main thing about shamanism is the concept of soul loss and power loss, and this is how they will heal. So if you add a trauma in your life, something big enough that you can say that you're not the same person after that, like there's kind of a shift. Then in shamanism, they call that soul loss. And it's a part of you that just is going to hide away in the spirit world. And then you have kind of a hole in you. And usually this is how people will describe it. They feel like there's something missing. They feel they're empty, or there's a void inside of them. Usually what happened when what caused the soul loss is close to any kind of abuse, any kind of also big accident, like car accident, that it's enough to a big shock, or anything that causes a coma will do that. Yeah.
And a big part of the shamanic understanding there is that, soul equals consciousness, right?
Yes.
And so there was a part of your consciousness, something was so horrific, so terrible, that a part of your consciousness literally takes the felt experience of that trauma and then basically breaks off from you, heads off into the spirit world, heads off into these consciousness realms, so that your essence, your main self, right, doesn't have to feel the trauma of that, the felt experience of the trauma. It might have a memory, but it's not accessing that felt experience, which was too hard to process.
But then it causes people to go into kind of self-sabotage behavior, into addiction and anger and so on, kind of coping things going on, because there's the void there. So it's kind of a signal to say, hey, you need to kind of heal this from this event. And then what we do as shamanic practitioners, that we call the soul back home, and then retrieving that part, then we say, okay, you retrieve it. Now we have to integrate it so it doesn't go away again. And so we find ways to make life easier, to heal from what happened at that moment.
And one part of how we approach this is very much, we have a philosophy of, give a person a fish and you feed them for a day, teach a person to fish and you feed them for life. So, many shamanic practitioners, they provide that kind of soul retrieval. Our approach is basically, we'll teach you how to do it for yourself, right? And one of the main things there is that if you don't do a lot of shamanic integration process, working with the soul that comes back and all this, it's, here today and gone tomorrow. It can leave again. So it very much requires lifestyle changes. It requires, working with a shamanic approach. And one reason, again, back to the spiritual hygiene part, one reason why soul loss is so important from that perspective is that if you lose a piece of your soul, you can think of it as a piece of paper that you've torn off a corner of, right? Now there's a hole. And another way to look at it is, you have a house and now you have a broken window. And so, most spiritual beings, when they're passing by, they respect the broken window. They won't climb in, right? But there's negative beings who see the open window and they see it as an opportunity to go gather energy and be parasitic on you. And they'll climb in, right? And this can have deep effects on your personality, on your felt experience of life, of your just how you feel from day to day. And so, a big part of that, therefore, is to learn not just how to, a stopgap solution is, okay, you do lots of spiritual cleansing and you wash out that room and get out the empty window, right? And then you kind of energetically seal. Right. But ultimately, this is kind of like, when you have a broken window and you put up the plastic on it, right? You tape it up. The long-term solution, that works, but you'll have to keep clearing that area out and then putting up that plastic because it keeps getting broken into. It's a temporary solution. The long-term solution is addressing that soul loss and basically, providing that new window to keep things out. I'm sure that this is a topic that's actually very near and dear to you, Whitney, because of I read your bio, and so I'm sure that you have thoughts on this for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, one, it's come up a lot. I think the last 2 or 3 episodes I've talked about soul retrieval is something that a lot of people will engage with clients with, when they're healers. Is just, you said, reclaiming, and it's also interesting because. Yes, in my life in general, I imagine you're maybe referring to like addiction, substance abuse, eating disorders. I imagine that a lot of those are tied to sort of those missing things that sort of caused parts of ourselves to be, I see it as almost like condemning parts of ourselves, like the parts of ourselves we couldn't accept, or something that happened to us that was so upsetting that we just it got, like you said, kind of got cut out and sort of sent away because it was too much. But then we're left with knowing that we basically banished part of who we are, and you can't ever really do, a soul is always complete. So even when it's not there, it's just sort of, I feel like, just missing or without that part, it's still always longing to return. And if you've said, no, I don't want to face that part of myself, then there is going to be this incomplete sense. And so I've it's something I've thought about a lot recently, because I'm actually on a trip right now. I'm doing a cross-country road trip. I'm in Florida. You can see the beach behind me. Cool. And I thought I was going to go on this like really relaxing like journey and just, evaluate and reflect. And it's turned out to be a reclaiming of my lost parts. Along the way, I just kept getting these messages that, my wounds were coming up, like things, it was like, when you try to like push something down, and then eventually it like, kind of comes to the surface and is saying, this needs to be known and heard and addressed. And it reminds me of everything you're saying, because I feel like these were all things that I just wasn't, first of all, I didn't know it still needed attention. And second of all, I feel like it was part of sort of my ecosystem that was like, you may think that you're ready to move forward, but you're not working, like things are not working right. There's things missing. There's things that you have, denied about yourself, that you've tried to, again, condemn. And in order to move forward, you have to incorporate all of that. So it's amazing. What you're saying right now literally feels like you've stepped into my life and saw like what I was doing yesterday or something. right aligned, which, synchronicity, it's no coincidence. But I just love that you're speaking to this, because I think that and also as a therapist, this is what we're doing when people come to us and they say, I don't know what's going on, but I am so depressed and I'm so anxious. And because people have no clue, they really don't. And so it's so wonderful that there's people like you who are taking this approach, because, the wild thing is that this is what's actually the reality of the situation, is that there's so many unseen factors that we're not engaging with. So therefore we try all these different things that, like you said, are sort of just like, plastic over the window. So this is giving me a lot of thoughts.
Wonderful. Well, that's what we're here for.
Yes, there's the soul loss, and there's also the power loss. And the power loss is like you will have the same symptoms than the soul loss. So, very like no motivation, sad, depressed, and so on. But the source is not the same. So it's more when you're not addressing your boundaries. And so you lose power because you give powers to others instead of keeping the powers for you. And also, like, if it's same with addiction, you can if you give the power for, let's say, coffee, okay, let's say you're addicted to coffee and it's just giving you stress and heart problem and so on. I'll go with the light one, but it can be anything. Well, then you're giving power to this spirit. Coffee is a spirit, after all. It is a plant, and maybe you have to see that you cannot work with this spirit. And when you see it, and when you shift your perspective and say, oh, you know what, maybe coffee spirit is just too much for me. Maybe I have to
Is that coffee?
Yeah, it's tea, actually.
Like, I jive well with the coffee spirits. We're bud.
Your bodies. And so you can do that. Same with food addiction. It's funny, we talk about that. I was someone with food addiction. I could have taken, like, I had a very depressed moment in my life where I took like 40 pounds in like 2 or 3 months. I was gorging my emotions at that time. And I didn't even know at the time that it was an addiction or a problem to eat. I thought it was just something that people do. You see that on TV. It's not as like alcoholism or drugs. It's like kind of socially accepted to some degree.
Sounds taboo.
Yeah. So I didn't know it was. I thought I was just sad. I was eating. I know it was bad, but at the same time, I didn't know it was a real, addiction.
Aren't you supposed to eat ice cream after a breakup? Like they see on TV all the time.
Yeah. And so what helped me with shamanism is that the way I see the food now, I see the food as just spirits, as plants that die so I can live. And now I have to honor that energy. And for me to eat over what I need is, it's kind of not respecting them, because then I'm kind of eating too much instead of just saying, they sacrifice their life. It can be animals, it can be plants, it can be all these type of animals and plants. And you think about it, you have in front of you your plate, and you're like, wow, well, that fish, it gave its life for me, so I better find a something good to do with that energy today. This is when I sit in front of my meal, this is what I do now. And I thank the fish, or I thank the plant, and I say, thank you for your energy and thank you for your life. And then, yes, I eat. I honor what I have in my plate.
It's a big change when you kind of give up, let's say, eating for pleasure, and when you realize, okay, I'm eating life here, right? Whether it's broccoli or whether it's fish or anything, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, okay, I need to eat life in order to live. This is part of the game that we play while we are living, whether you like it or not, right? And even vegetables, you're eating life. and therefore the question is, how much do you need, and not to overindulge it. This kind of shifts when you start thinking about the consciousness, and coming back to your web of nature, right, and your web of consciousness out there. When you start treating, kind of looking at it from an animist perspective, that there is this consciousness in everything, and therefore how do we interact with it like it's our brother, like it's our sister? How do we interact with this world around us in an ethical way?
I was in one of my my vision with my guide in the spirits here, and so I point here, we have a window, sorry, but in on our property, they say you are like walking dirt, and that really make a difference in my mind, that we are earth, we're just walking along, we're living right now, but we will return to it. We're a part of it. And when I see that, I'm like just a little piece of earth walking around here and there. I'm no different from the forest. I'm no different from everything that I eat. I'm part of the ecosystem. I'm just, a certain shape. And maybe we feel that not as grounded because we're not like the trees, right? We don't have our roots grounded in the earth, but we are little, I really see it, we're little pieces of earth walking around with our water inside of us and so on, and distributing like all the organism.
We're dirt that's come from the earth, and we even provide services to the vegetables and such. We carry their seeds, we help them propagate and spread, but we're deeply ingrained in that web of life, to the point where ultimately when we pass on, right, whether we are buried or cremated, our energy is going back to this earth. If we're cremated, our heat energy and then other parts of us get distributed back into the system. And if we're buried, right, we go back to the earth eventually. If you die at the base of a tree, eventually that tree is going to eat you, because literally the dirt that you are will go to it. So, we are very much in that system.
Yeah. That's so fascinating to think about. And I just love that. I mean, I just had a visual when you said, we're just walking dirt. It's sort of like, there's dirt, and then it comes almost like in a cartoon, like it just becomes like a person that's walking, and then just like goes right back down, like almost like just like a wave of like, sometimes you're a part of the whole, and then other times you're like a cresting wave, and then you go back into it. And there's really no difference between us and that, the whole dirt floor.
Totally.
Exactly.
I do have a question, when you speak about, overeating, and I've been there, I've struggled for most of my life with an eating disorder, binge eating. And, you probably know that experience when there's just not enough, and that's the case for any addict. Like it doesn't, and you recognize at a certain point, you don't want to, like when you're in the middle of binge, you don't want to think about the fact that it really doesn't make sense to be eating this food. It's not keeping you full. You're overfull. It's just something that and I've always thought that it's like you're seeking something, and you're seeking life force, you're seeking love, you're seeking, God, if you will, but you're not taking, it's like a bucket with holes in it. It's like nothing is being sustained. And so I wonder, from a shamanic perspective, how do you see, like when you're in that state with food, what's going on for that person when they're not, because, you guys said, like, when you appreciate your food, you probably just need that one plate of food, and you're recognizing that you're honoring, you're blessing this food, you're intaking it, you're kind of becoming one with the food. But if you're not in that mind space, I guess you aren't ever going to be satiated. So I'm just wondering your all thoughts and how you were able to kind of overcome that, because it's something that so many people struggle with, because food is delicious and the experience is pleasurable, and it also helps you to avoid, right, when we're having these powerful emotions. I've had times where it literally felt like I was magnetized to food. Like when I had these emotions, I just couldn't do anything but I was just like, just give me food, please, just give me something. And it almost feels like you're under a spell. If anyone's been in a really intense binge, it's like you're just in this mind, like this, almost a trance. You talk about trance, but it must be a different kind of trance, not the connecting, unified consciousness trance. So any thoughts on that? I would love to hear.
Oh yeah. So there's many things going on with, when first the thing to address is your relationship to food, the vision that you have. And yes, it's true that when you're just seeing at something delicious that you can take and will give you comfort, then there's almost for me, it was unstoppable, even though I knew in my head, it's like I should stop. I would continue to eat and go down the bag of chips and then probably have cookies and other stuff, like, just all night long. And yes, you feel like you have no power. And so that's that part with the powerless. It's like you give your power to the food, so you have to take it back. Now, how do you take back is, there's many ways to do that. In shamanism, you can find a guide to help you. This is what I do. So I connect with a specific spirit guide for me that helped me with food. And then it's slowly just trying to understand the situation and be like, so why do I eat? So I did a list, with all the reason why I eat, and there's like over like 140. I know I could put like categories on it, but it was like pretty much for anything, all range of situation, because I'm happy, because I'm sad, because I'm stressed, because I'm tired, because anything, right? There's just all reason are good to eat.
I can attest to the existence of this list. It was a comprehensive and impressive list. Unfortunately, it was burnt ceremoniously as part of a letting go ritual, but it was quite the list.
Yeah. So that's the thing. That's the thing. You have like all these reasons. There will always be a good reason to eat. And so it's really to go back to the spirit world. Okay, we'll work with my spirit guide. The guide will give you kind of personal advice and how to work through things, like, is there a soul part missing? Is there something missing there? So there's this. Now, another thing that we address in shamanism is what we call ancestral healing. And so this is when there is certain pattern that are going through your ancestral line and go down to you, and so that are kind of sharing your bloodline, and now you are kind of having this curse or this kind of type of pattern and soul loss. And so what we do with that is that is that here in your family, or are you the first one with that? Well, in my case, it's going up like a bit. So I know that it's not coming only from me. It's something that I've learned to do because my family is doing it too. So that's another thing that I can address as well. Yes.
Yeah, the ancestral part is interesting because it's not just learned behaviors coming through, it's not just that kind of physical world part of the learned behaviors coming from other people, but there's also that spiritual component where if you have an ancestor who is still experiencing, let's say, soul loss, is still experiencing some of these problems, and let's say in that ancestor it led to a substance abuse problem, there is an aspect where that ancestor can be playing out its own desires through you by influencing you. So that's something also to bear in mind. That's not always just the physical. It can sometimes be this ancestral trauma still playing out through a being who's trying to resolve their own issues through you, because you're the one in the physical world having experience, and they might hijack that to a degree, right? So
wow. Okay. Well, with that, I have to ask that when you're working with a client, let's say somebody comes to you and they are overeating or they are really depressed, how do you sort of, when, as much as things are interconnected in this spiritual ecosystem, it's a little bit nebulous. There's a lot going on there. So how are you able to, work with one and able to identify is it an ancestral influence? Is it a energetic cleansing that's needed from the current environment? Is it, this person's own, soul loss? How do you know? How do you identify that for people?
So, and this is why we very much have this philosophy of teach a person to fish, right? Don't fish for them, don't give them the fish. And so it's one of these situations where it's going to take a lot of work, right? Yeah. It takes a lot of work, and it's not, anyone who tells you, okay, just come into our virtual office here and sit down and I'll have you fixed up in half an hour, right? No. It's not how it works, right? And as you can see, all the components that can be at play within a person's life: ancestral trauma, it can be learned behaviors, it can be soul loss, it can be attachments, there's even the possibility the land that you live on is affecting you in a certain way, right? There's so many different possibilities within this spiritual ecosystem that you live in, and there therefore, it really is about teaching you to have the tools to do it on your own with with guidance, of course, from someone who's been there before. But at the same time, we find that it's so much more effective when the student goes in and like is having daily or weekly exchanges with their guardian spirit, with their guides, to learn and to even be given ceremonies, to be given these steps for how they can heal in their own unique way, right? I guess one thing that we kind of didn't discuss, I don't know if we did, but the idea of a shamanic journey, right, where it's that entering that trance. It's kind of huge. Sorry, we kind of left that out. A trance, a shamanic journey is when you enter into that trance state, right? And you basically can project your consciousness out to the spirit world. And it's an odd thing because the spirit world itself, right? It's this, we find it's this realm of pure consciousness where, the physical world, it's a realm of time and space, and consciousness is embodied within matter, right? Either within this body or within a rock, right? And, but the spirit world is this, realm of pure consciousness and without time and space. It's very incomprehensible to us. It's very foreign. It's very different, right? In many ways, it's unintelligible to our primate minds. So when we send our consciousness to make contact with it, very much the spirit world takes pity on us, and it looks into our minds. It looks into what our spiritual vocabulary is, and it speaks our language. And so it will communicate through symbols that make sense to us, and it will give you kind of this lucid dream-like experience of your interaction with the spirit world. It is not a literal experience. You're not going anywhere physical, but what matters is that there's that symbolic interaction. It's a communication, it's a conversation. And the meaning being expressed through that symbolic experience is deeply meaningful. And you can get very direct kind of guidance and help in this way, right? Your spiritual guides could be like, okay, here's what you got to do to help clear up this issue, and it's usually very deep, like working on your soul, working on all this. So one of the things that we teach our students is, to work on these issues is just do a lot of shamanic journeying, and literally you will learn the steps from the spirits yourself. You don't need us. We can help guide you from our experience. We can help you because we've been on that path before. We can lead you along the way, but at the same time you got to do the hard work of going into that state.
That's always what we do. It's like, here's what I've learned, here's like how the spirit helped me and guide me through that, and I provide kind of a guided journey that is aligned with that. But then I say, hey, give place to your experience here. That's one way to do it. I always say that because I find the spirits, they will get to me in a way that will work for me, but maybe you need something completely different. So it's just always being open to any experience, for sure.
And when you start opening yourself up to the spirits in that way, it is just wondrous. And it's one of these things where we find like the first thing that you do when you start working with us is meet with your guardian spirit. And this is very analogous to the idea of, let's say, a guardian angel within certain, Judeo-Christianity. And then, it's very similar to the idea of a power animal or spirit animal within various shamanic traditions. But guardian spirit is useful because it's very, nebulous, because many different spirits can take on this guardian spirit role for you. And this is a being that's been with you your entire life. It's there kind of to keep you on the path, right? It's been guiding you, it's been helping you out and all this, and it's going to be with you until the end, right? But then you also have spiritual guides. And these are beings who they come into and out of your life to help empower you, to help you through various things. And they get something out of it too, because they help spread their pattern, help spread their wisdom into this material world, manifest it through you. And so these are the types of beings you can work with. But ultimately, it's interesting because these are very positive, benevolent beings. And therefore, they really care about your free will.
Yeah.
And they won't get involved unless you ask them to. That's the thing. They might be there standing by, but they're not going to get involved. They might be looking at you and saying, well, Whitney's having a really hard time. But, she's having her experience of this existence. And who are we to say, well, she should be playing this game differently, or she should be having her own experience. Maybe she has this deep level soul contract or something playing out. We're not going to interfere. But the moment that you say, okay, my guardian spirit and guides, I need help. Come on in, guide me. I'm giving you all my love and light. Just come help me. I want you in my life. That starts changing things drastically. And, it starts creating things like dreams and synchronicities. All these kind of guidance also can create kind of very paranormal confirmation events where it's like a synchronicity, but on steroids, because there's that paranormal experience going on with it, right? There's a lot of stuff that can start happening like that. So it's a very wonderful thing when you start reaching out to your guides in that way. And that's a huge part of the training we offer.
And again, so many questions based on everything. One is, now you say everybody has a guardian angel or a guardian spirit. So let's say that, I would say the average person walks through life not thinking about that and not even being aware of connecting or engaging with that. Does that mean that these people are just kind of in the wings, or essences, spirits are just in the wings, just kind of, twiddling their thumbs and hoping this person will eventually acknowledge them? Or will they still interact? Because I know, some people who are in no way really connected spiritually, but they'll still have things where they'll say, wow, it's the weirdest thing. This person just popped in my head, or this thing just came into my life. And so even if we don't engage with them, do they still stay in our peripheral and will, offer things at times? Because is it kind of like really anything else in life where people can offer you something, but not until you engage and actually see it for yourself and start, working with it, that things really take off? So let's say you start engaging regularly with your guardian, you start talking to them. Will they see that as like a door opening and they'll start being more involved and incorporated in your life? Or how does that work?
Yes, so I would say that, let's say the door is closed, you're not aware of your guardian spirit. Well, then you will receive sign, but you will just not take the opportunities, or not, you will be blind to them.
It's almost like invitations.
Yes, and then when it happened in your life, and you start receiving sign and be like, okay, this is like, I cannot explain what happened here. And then you start, questioning, and then eventually, if you I don't know how your path will lead you to it, but you will find your way to connect with your guardian spirit, then yes, because you'll just open your eyes even more, and you will what I like to say is like kind of a vocabulary with them. Some symbols will remind you of this particular spirit. Let's say your guardian spirit is an owl, then you'll be like, oh, I saw an owl. Okay, I what I was thinking, or oh yeah, it's true, something special happened that night, or it's my answer to a question I had. Sometimes too, it's like oh, okay, do it. Yes, it's a good, you're on the path type of symbol.
And when you're in that state of not working with your guardian spirit, absolutely, it sometimes sends you events that almost serve to help wake you up, right? And that we are this consciousness that's embodied in this physical body, and we can really get lost in the physical world. And so we forget about our higher self. We forget about our goals and our purpose. We have, what we find is that we very much have a goal in life, right? Our meaning, our purpose for being here. And a big part of life is discovering that goal and acting upon it. Guardian spirit is there to kind of remind you, to wake you up to that and all that, right? So sometimes you might have this weird synchronicity that just aligned your life perfectly, so you can start working towards something. It can absolutely be there in the background to help you get to your goals, right? At the same time, a guardian spirit often is what, let's say you're at an intersection, right? And you're about to drive, and they just have this gut feeling that you shouldn't. And you just wait for a second, and then suddenly a tractor trailer just blows through the intersection through a red light. That kind of intuition can sometimes very much be your guardian spirit just helping you out in that a huge amount actually, but taking those kind of moments. And this is why, you can look at a lot of events, especially strange events in your life, as almost initiation. in terms of the ongoing pathway of your life, initiation into becoming who you really are meant to be.
Ouais.
Sometimes even a paranormal event like a haunting is sent to you because, yes, okay, fine. You've moved into a house where it's haunted by this nice little old lady. But at the same time, you were meant to move into that house at that time in your life to remind you, let's say, that unseen presences do exist, that there is a spiritual side to life because you were getting too lost in the physical. These kind of initiations happen throughout our life. And I don't know if this is a good way to segue, but this kind of paranormal experience and initiation event is ultimately what, in a deep way, led Loava to adopt shamanism. And I had a lot of weird synchronicities in my life too that kept me on the path of delving into all this weird esoteric stuff. And these kind of little things throughout your life, they're just those nudges in the right direction.
Yeah. And I love that you call it an initiation. I appreciate that because I believe it's really powerful for people to hear that, because, part of my journey recently has been coming to accept and make peace with things that I was so upset that happened, because it feels, when you're disconnected, it feels like, why did this happen? Why did this? But just to your point, I've come to realize more lately that it did initiate something. Some of the most challenging and difficult things that I was so upset about at the time were transformative. They end up being a catalyst, an initiation into what I see now is, I had a lot of soul growth after that. Something really changed, started growing, evolving. So I think that's important to hear, because again, so people get so hung up on, why did this have to happen? And then we get stuck in the past and regret, which is just, a recipe for disaster and for misery. Because if you curse and can't accept what's happened to you and only see it as negative, you're never going to be able to look forward and bless everything that's ever happened to you, because it's all been a part of your evolutionary path.
I got a perfect example for you. Earlier this year, I picked up Lyme disease. I had a tick bite, obviously, and it got pretty bad. If they finally diagnosed it as Lyme disease after 2 weeks. And it really took me out of commission for like an entire month until I was finally feeling better. And it was pretty rough, pretty terrible. And during that period, right, what was happening was, like, with the Spirit World Center, we were definitely expanding, and I was putting in all this work, and like I just felt like I was on top of the world. And but then this came in, and I had to like slow down so much for like an entire month. And part of me was really frustrated. And Loava, she does a lot of channeling. And so, the question that naturally came up was, come on, spirits, aren't I doing the right thing? Like, why? Well, how could you let this happen to me? And the message that came through very much was, Eric, this is part of your path. You're going to learn something from this. And the thing that I had to learn was, prior to this, I'd have my list of like 50 things I had to do in the day, and I would work through it, and I would get a ton of it done, right? Like I'm working full blast here, but I'd still have like 20 things left on it, right? And I was beating myself up over it. I got to work harder. I got to get all this done. I was really kind of putting myself in a negative state because I was holding that over my head. And the big realization that came from having this Lyme disease and having to slow down was, Eric, everything is perfect as it is. Right? That you're at the stage where everything is fine. Okay. Grow the center however you need to do, but everything is fine and perfect in this moment, and the metaphor that came through was, look at a tree. Well, it's going to one day be this great big tree, but right now it's just this little shrub, it's like 6 feet tall. It's this little tree out in the yard. No one except a complete psychopath goes up to that tree and says, you're useless and no good. Look at you. You're only 6 feet tall and you're a terrible tree. No one does that.
Yeah,
at least I hope no.
Grown like a six, one on each more.
And the thing is, therefore, the realization is that tree is perfect in this moment. That shrub or that sapling is perfect in this very moment. And it's on this path of growth. One day that tree is going to be, 50 feet high. Right now it's only 6 feet, but that is okay because it's perfect now. It's going to be perfect then. So everything is fine. Relax. So basically, yeah, ultimately the universe gave me Lyme disease, so I learned to chill. So
Wow.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's sometimes it's a very, it's like, okay, well, I know that everything else happened, but this can't be part of the plan. This is to why this. So thank you for sharing, because I know some friends who have gotten Lyme disease, and I know things like that where it really is just really upsetting, and it's hard to integrate and accept. So thank you for acknowledging that for people, so we can all remember that these are everything that happens to us becomes part of our heroic story rather than our victim story of, oh, because of this I didn't, but it's despite this I did.
And it's one of those things where, because I was given that narrative from the spirits, that understanding, then it turned into a deeply transformational event. I can honestly say that it transformed the way I approach work and reality itself in such a big way that, frankly, I know it's weird to hear this, but I'm thankful I got Lyme disease, because it honestly changed me in an incredibly deep way. And so this, of course, is something that comes from kind of the shamanic and spiritual understanding of things, where you look at consciousness, you see how everything is consciousness playing itself out. And you look at consciousness, right? What do our consciousnesses like to do? They like to tell stories. They like to create narratives. And this, I think, is a deeply impactful part of looking at it in this way as consciousness, is that the things that happen in your life, right? It's not a meaningless universe. It's not this universe where nothing has meaning, nothing has purpose, everything's just random events, right? If you start to look at like everything has meaning, it's deeply transformative once again, but it gives you hope, it gives you a faith, but it also allows you to find that meaning within things, and that can be very, very healing for sure.
And just as you said that, I had this visualization of that little shrub tree becoming, and that as it grows and changes, and rather than saying like, what is this? Why is this happening? It's like, oh yes, now I'm growing. Now look at me go, look at me develop in these different ways that I didn't expect. But we don't tend to do that as humans. Often we're like, what? This isn't what I thought. This isn't what it was supposed to be. And this is uncomfortable. This is weird, rather than embracing it. A message I've been getting repeatedly lately is one step at a time. Your journey is unfolding, allow it to happen one step at a time. Because I tend to be kind of impatient, and I'm like, let's go from 0 to 60 right now, and let's get there and get going. And it's sort of that acknowledgement of things are unfurling just as they should. You're exactly where you're meant to be. And that can be a hard concept to accept. So I do have to ask you guys, how did you all come into this work? Were you born onto like a shamanic commune? Did you grow up with this type of family, or how did you come to embrace this life?
Well, I'm the boring one that can be wrapped up a bit faster. So I guess I'll go first, and I'll leave it to Loava. So myself, I came to all this woo and all this esoteric stuff when I was 12 years old. I went on a trip to England, and on the last day we did this tour of all the megaliths, right? So we did Avebury Circle, we did Stonehenge and all this. And I was just enraptured. And I got back, and of course, in the New Age section of the bookstore, I'm like devouring anything on Druidry, and that got me into Celtic shamanism. And then, that led to like things like Wicca, paganism, and then the esoteric, anything occult, right? I got deep into just everything that I could. And so along the way, I definitely got into shamanism. And then in my late teens, of course, I discovered girls, and I went to university, and I, fell away from all that stuff. And then in my early 20s, I got back into it, right? And that just led to me walking away from my corporate job, where I was suffering my own power loss in that situation, even though that was a fantastic career. Everyone was, everyone was looking at me like this 24-year-old guy who had figured it all out. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm hating this. So, I walked away from that, and that just put me on this path of spiritual exploration, of looking at all these things I'd been aware of before and saying, okay, let me dive into this as deep as I can. What will I find? And that, of course, led me to delve deeply into things like nature spirituality and shamanism. And then I met Loava, and she was kind of the missing piece, because she's the one who has the, well, my way in was very deeply intellectual and very I always get this wrong, left brained, right? Left brain.
Left
Yeah.
brain, yes.
Well, my approach was very left brain. Her approach, of course, is very right brain. She's the creative. She's and this is why, let's say, in the Spirit World Center, we have different programs, right? One, the shamanic journeying, is more the right brain approach, while as spiritual symbiosis, the spirit craft, is more the left-brained approach for those who want to have this kind of ceremony and almost work contractually with certain spiritual energies and connect with them in this form of like business meetings, almost in ceremony. And so there's that divide, and that's something that we started working on. So
how did you two meet exactly? I have to know. I love meet stories. When was the moment? When was the time? Where was the place?
It was online dating.
It was online, but
plenty of fish too. So it's not even one of the good ones.
But that's a funny story behind it. I mean, I was looking for friends, and I'm not good with all these online platforms. And so I was seeing this a friend category. And so I subscribed to I create my account, and in the same night, I have like 60 messages from men, and a lot of them are doubtful. And I don't think they look at my profile and what I really wanted. I mean, I guess it's what happened all the time, but I wanted to close my account. And they said, sorry, you cannot close your account. You have to wait 24 hours before doing so. And I'm like, really? What is that? And so I was frustrated. And an hour later, Eric wrote to me. He was, he's well-spoken, eloquent. And I say, right now, I just want something platonic. But he said, okay, and then we just exchanged online for a while, and we eventually met. And it didn't took very long after we met that we just, decided to be together, to start the spirit world. And it went very fast. We just felt a very big fusion. It's like we were due to meet each other pretty much. Yeah,
it went really well very quickly, and then a month in, we had that event, the possession event, which I know that you're dying to hear about eventually. But maybe we should go back on your experience to there, though, because I think you need the background before we get to the events.
Oh, you're a good teaser. So I grew up in a Catholic family. I was praying like 3 prayers every night with my family. I went to Catholic school. But I grew up also in a haunted house, and my sister was seeing ghosts. It was a 130 years old house. And I was hearing them or feeling them when I had to go to the toilet at night. So it was very uncomfortable. Anyways, so our mother, she said, just pray to God and everything will be fine. And we were praying to God and everything was fine after. But the thing is that it's as if like there's more to it, right? I mean, then we have this experience. We don't really question more than that. It finished to be just a kind of a spooky story around a fire with your friends, and then life goes on. So that was that to me for my, early teenage years. Then I went, to school, and then I had a boyfriend that was, when I was 16, and last 4 years, a very toxic relationship. I finally get out of it, but I felt truly, truly broken. And so I started to delve into spirituality and, meditation. I was, feeling a lot of anxiety in my life, very lost as well, didn't know what to do and so on. Decided to go back to school at the age of 20 because I left out a long story. But so it was a very liminal space for me where I just trying to feel better, take back my powers, heal myself, and, being and connecting with the divine. So the more I was meditating, the more I started to have, paranormal encounters. And so one of them was before I met with Eric. It was with, I had another boyfriend at the time, and we were it was just after the grandfather funeral, his grandfather funeral. So the night we're sleeping in the bed, and I just feel like something wants to connect with me, and I'm like, yes. And so because I'm curious, and I didn't expect that, but my mouth opened, and the spirit went inside my mouth, and I kind of feel like it's went in my brain, and I was not comfortable anymore. But then that was worse. My head turned and looked at my ex-boyfriend with big eyes, like big eyes, like owl kind of eyes. And I was not speaking. I was looking at him, and he was like, what's going on? What's going on? I could hear him, but I could not do anything about it. And then in my head, I heard, Gab, it's dad, take care of your family. And then went away. And I like start crying, and he's like, what was that? What's going on? It's like, you will never believe me. You'll never believe me. And he said, just tell me. I mean, like, it's already weird. So I said, well, I think your grandfather went into my brain to talk to you. And he's like, what? But then he believed me, he believed me. And I said, the thing is that when I told him the sentence, he said dad, because I didn't know that his nickname was dad. I mean, to me, it's odd that especially in French, that his nickname was dad, when it was his granddad. So it kind of was a confirmation event for us, be like, oh, okay, that was really him, there's no way I could have known that. So
yeah, it actually said, hey, it's dad.
Yeah.
Which is very strange. And that was actually your ex's nickname for his grandfather.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you had the other event around that time with the
mirror. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you were talking about, I had a lot of events.
There's three here actually that really start things off.
So that happened, and then yes, and not long after that, something else happened. And we again with the same poor guy. We went to my family, and so my family house. It was a new house. It was not the same haunted house, but this one was haunted too, and we didn't know at the time, but now I highly it's just normal when I think about it. But it's a whole house, and we made we went in the attic to clean. So I cleaned the attic for my parents. There was a lot of stuff that was mine because they just moved, and there was stuff that was still my stuff that I didn't sort through. And so then we had a regular day, then we go to bed, and I have to kind of describe how the room was set. And it's that you have the room, and the bed was it's a double bed that is on against the wall, okay? And on the floor there is a one single mattress that we were too lazy to take out, because my sister the day before, she was sleeping there with us. It's a small house, and so we just let it there, and it's important for later in the story. So we went to bed in the double bed. I was the one sleeping on the outside of the bed, and my ex-boyfriend was sleeping against the wall. And so I had a dream that night where I was mixing with my hand a salad in a bowl of glass, and as I mix the salad, I see a shadow appearing and rushing towards me, and the ball just explodes in 1,000 pieces. And then I wake up and I start screaming like I'm about to die. And so my ex, he just want to touch my arm like this, say, hey, you all right? I've been taking away on the ground, and I was not even.
You felt something pull on your arm, right?
Thank you. Yeah. And so I was on the ground. I was not even touching the mattress. I was very far, and not only that, I was towards the some visual, some kind of doing it, but there was the closet, and it was kind of open, and it's behind that closet. It is the attic. And it just, I was like aligned with that. I was the scariest thing in my life.
Yeah, you felt yourself completely pulled off the bed.
Yeah,
And
it's
like
hard.
you went over top of the mattress that was below you, or that was beside the bed, right?
And
so you were pulled like 4 feet, 5 feet horizontally.
That's the thing. And what is weird about that is that my father, he was like sleeping in the room under us. And it's this, you know, it's an old house, like you hear everything, you hear nothing. In fact, the morning after, he said, you probably just had too much hot chocolate. He was just like oblivious. He didn't want to hear about it. But my mother did hear us. And that's, you know, like she heard us. She went and she came and she said, are you all right? What happened? Because I mean, like not only I screamed like there was no tomorrow, but I mean, I fell on the floor and it's like, you know, like it's so, no, it's just such a weird story. So then, but that was not enough for me to question and the spirit world. I just prayed to God as usual. And then another thing happened, and it's, I had I went to an art, I studied fine art at university, but like in a weekend, I had an art retreat, if you want, with an online teacher. And we just went from a meditative, a long meditation, like 1.5 hours, and kind of painting at the same time. And I was in a trance. I didn't know at the time when I was in a trance. And so I get out of my room. It's at the second story of my house at the time. And I go down the stairs, and in front of the stairs, there is a mirror. And then I have to turn to go in the bathroom, but it's as if I felt grabbed and I stayed in front of the mirror. And then what happened is that as I looked in the mirror, it's as if I was the one in the mirror and someone was me. And so that someone was speaking to me through the mirror as I was in the mirror. I don't know if that makes sense here. Yeah. Okay. So that's the weird part. So I look at the being look at me in the mirror and start talking to me in like, I think Spanish or something like that, something completely like that I don't know or that I can't remember, but it's just this part. And it was saying you have to connect with us, the spirit world and so on. And I'm like, okay. It told me things that I have to do. And then I was scared, then I was like, I need help. Am I going crazy here? What's going on with all that happened to me? So, and then I don't know who to talk to with that. And so I asked my friends, 2 different friends in the same day. I said, hey, do you know medium? Do you know like a medium? I didn't even know about shamanism at the time. And but they say no, but I know a shaman. They both say that. Right. A shaman. Okay, I'll go with that. Like, give me a name. I'm gonna go see a shaman. And so I connect with a beautiful native shaman situated in Ottawa. She was very powerful. Like she asked me if I have like Amerindian root, and I said yes. My grandmother was Amerindian, and she said okay. Then she'd accept to help me. So she pretty much introduced me, to shamanism during that summer. And but the first thing, after like 15 minutes, the first time I saw her, after 15 minutes, we sat and she was kind of just, going down, layered head down. And she's like, I'm going to speak to my guides for you. And she said, you will have a difficult fall. I see you working with children and you're overdue to work with the spirits. And I'm like, okay. and everything happened. I mean, during the fall, I was living in a duplex. Half of it went on fire. We have to move like 4 times. I was doing art exhibition. I had to move my sculpture to find another garage to finish my sculpture. And I also started to work with children. I had like kind of contract with a private school and the how do you call it, like the art center,
And
and
that was completely out of the blue. You'd never
yeah,
worked with
no,
kids
no,
before,
it's I
right?
had one contact. It was just one girl that say, hey, you're working there, do they are looking for someone? And then from that girl I had like 5 contract in a month, and I was everywhere. Yeah, and then it's just unfold, and I'm like, okay, this is real. Like you can connect with your guides, they can help you with the future, and kind of align yourself, prepare yourself, and help others too.
And ultimately what
Yeah.
you picked up on there was a tower moment, right? Like the tower card, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, it's gonna be a difficult autumn, and
Yeah.
you're gonna be working with kids, but you have to work with the spirits. Like, okay, tower, your old life falling away, your new life
yeah.
starting.
Well, it was literally a tower moment, because in the tower card, the tower's on fire.
Yeah,
There you
that's
go.
the hell, yeah. I mean, so that's all that, together. I could not explain all of this in any other ways. And I'm like, okay, I will do it. And so I was working with this lady. And then I also met other people that had an interest in shamanism that I didn't even know at the time. And they guide me to, learn from certain school as well. And so I explored and start practicing deep shamanism a lot, because it was bringing me so much meaning, healing. And yeah, so that was just wonderful.
Do you ever have any paranormal events now? But it sounds like you all work with people who do. So you go to houses that are having, spirits presence, and that people are feeling disturbed. So how do you guys conceptualize that? The paranormal, the spirits that come in, and like, for example, like being pulled out of your bed. What was that about? Like, what were they trying to accomplish there? Why would a spirit do that? What is that? That's straight out of the movie, The Conjuring.
Well, once again,
I
it's the kind of the spiritual ecosystem model, right? And so there's actually many things that can be going on in a house. So for instance, we tend to assume, oh, it's always going to be, a human spirit, right? And this is kind of the narcissism of humanity, right? It's always going to be a human, right? And when in fact there can be a whole lot going on. For instance, one thing that we find is that often for an area of land, like let's say a forest, there is a spiritual essence, a consciousness that is almost like the caretaker spirit of that area. Okay. And it's there's actually an old Latin term for this. It's the genius loci, so the spirit of place. And the Romans used to take this very seriously. They would have a statue in their home of the genius loci to protect them in the area, right? And this is, for instance, some hauntings, right? They can be a caretaker spirit that is upset with you, and possibly for good reason. Let's say you move to a place, and in the backyard you're storing old paint cans, and they're seeping into the soil, and you're causing environmental damage. In that kind of situation, a spirit might, like a genius loci, a caretaker spirit, might look at you as an invasive species and be trying to push you out, right? So in that kind of situation, it's like, okay, I'm not going to, tell you how to push this spirit out. I'm going to tell you how to come to an understanding with them, how to fix the situation that you have, right?
Yeah.
And this is why in a haunting, we always feel like you got to get to the bottom of what's happening before you become reactive, before you're like, send it away, send it away. We once had this situation where Loava was going into the garage one morning, and she felt this kind of canine, like this dog-like thing, push past her legs and go into the garage. And we did have a dog at the time, and it was clear to me that Loava was in trance, because first off, the dog wasn't allowed in the garage, and secondly, Loava went into the garage and then came back in and didn't bring the dog back in, right? So very much tranced out. And but later that day, I go into the garage, and I was actually looking for a place to record some podcast episodes, because my current place was no good at the moment. And I'm looking around. I'm in there for like a minute, and I'm turning around. I'm looking at a mountain bike I have over there that I go on a daily ride with. And as I'm looking at it, the rear wheel explodes, and like just explodes super loud. And there's a and of course, it's a dusty garage, so I see the shock wave go out like 6 feet, right? And So of course that got me into reactive mode, right? It's like, whoa, something is, and I go and talk to Loava, and she relates the fact that she felt this being push into the garage. And I'm like, okay, we got something in here that's causing property damage. So we grab our drums and we, cleanse the house, and I'm out in the garage, and I'm mean at this point too. I'm like, whatever did that, get out, and I'm quite upset. And then, so later that day, when we come to our senses, Loava does some channeling, and we ask, okay, what was that? What was that all about? And it turns out that a spirit of the land, a consciousness of the landscape that was very kind of canine in its consciousness, that these spirits of the land, who we create this symbiosis with in our spiritual practice, right? We create this situation where we are giving to them and they're giving to us. I scratch your back if you scratch mine, right? I give you these gifts and this energy, and basically they tend to like you and start looking out for you and guiding you and this kind of thing. And so, spirits of the land had basically diagnosed that there was something wrong with that tire, and that it was probably going to explode when I went on a ride later that day. So they protected me. They basically possibly, saved my life if I had been near traffic. And they, made that tire explode while I was conscious of it. And so I could kind of see it go and understand what was going on. And of course, at that moment, I felt terrible. I had been a real meanie to this being. And so instantly I'm like, okay, please come back. You're more than welcome in the house. Come back. We went back to we have a stone circle, little stone circle in the back. And we, gave, plenty of little gifts to the being, like, okay, here's some energy, please, thank you, be in our lives. We really like you now. But this is an example of how you don't want to be reactive when it comes to a paranormal situation. You want to understand the situation fully before you react. Otherwise, you're, a primate who sees a snake and you're acting all scared. You want to understand the situation first, because then you can make good decisions.
Yeah. And to circle back to your question about like why, like in the case of the house and my parents, why was I thrown out of the bed? What's the difference between that spirit that kind of did make something explode, but for a good reason? What was the reason for me, like, to be thrown out of the bed, right? And what we came of an understanding is that I disturbed his space. There's a lot of paranormal encounters when you clean the attic or you do renovation, and so on. So when you're kind of disturbing the space, and this is what I did at the time. I was in the attic for a big part of the day, and also the other possibilities, because it's you cannot confirm always what it is, but you can have an idea, especially because at the time I was not there yet, right? It's kind of something that I just encounters. But my parents, they were living close to a camping site that was for people in recovery, like the AA and like all the people that
substance abuse problems.
Yeah.
And not only that, it wasn't nearby. It was like, imagine, okay, the house on the street there, right? That's where they're living. And then the compound that was this substance abuse retreat was in a U shape around the property, right? So they were completely encapsulated by this, right?
And so what we think is that, all these people that are in recovery, well, they have a lot of, trauma, a lot of energy that, like that. I mean, maybe the being that is living in the house is feeding on that type of energy. So it can attract certain type of spirits to live around too. If we talk of ecosystem, I mean, it's like if you're a fox and there's tons of bunnies around, you're going to stick around, right? So same kind of logic goes with spirits as well.
And one other dynamic with hauntings that's useful to bring up now, because you mentioned energy, is that ultimately for a spirit, it needs energy to do things, right? It needs kind of that spiritual energy, and it can get it from humans in many ways. It can get it from emotional energy, from psychic energy, even life force energy, right? Your chi, your prana. And something that happens often in a haunting, especially a being that seems to actually be purposely trying to freak you out, is that it's almost like an investment strategy by the spirit. And it has this limited amount of energy that it has, right?
Yeah.
And it wants more energy, right? It wants to be able to do more things, to experience more reality. And so it looks at you as potential food. And one of the easiest emotions to elicit from someone is fear, right? It could also feed off love, right? But who's going to give love to a random consciousness that's in your house, right? So it can get fear, and so it uses its little bit of energy, and it makes a tapping at the wall or something, or the experience of a tapping, you hear it, and that freaks you out, and it creates some fear, and therefore it feeds on that fear. It gives it more energy, and now it can do even bigger things. Right now you hear some footsteps upstairs. Okay, now you're really creeped out, and then eventually the doorknob is jiggling and all this. It's this positive feedback loop, this upward spiral, where you're giving fear, you're giving energy, and at the same time it's becoming empowered. This is why the best thing you can do if you're in that kind of haunting scenario is just start joking with it. Like, okay, I know you're trying to get a rise out of me, go away. I'm not taking you seriously. I know you can't harm me, and I know what you want. Right?
Yeah, that's the first step. Then you can have tool to see if it's what type of spirit it is, because if it's if it's a being, then you can help them, and so they can move on in the afterlife. They can find their place. They can kind of detach themselves from the house, and then kind of move along with the healed ancestors and like join the ancestral realm. So that's another part of it, of the hunting, is like, instead of just kicking someone out, you can actually help them move on and heal in the afterlife, and like help them, because a lot of people, or you disturb their space and they are attached, and they didn't move through their, they still have unfinished business. But also, if you offer them the opportunity to move on, they probably will take it. Like, most of the time they will be like, okay, yeah.
A lot of time they don't even know they're dead. That's
There's
a
a lot
of
well.
So yeah, and Loava, she does a ton of psychopomp work, and this is part of the shamanic path. It's what we teach in month 9 of the program, actually. Yeah. Anyways, it's basically helping the souls of the dead pass over, and helping to heal them as well, right? You want to address their soul loss and such before they pass over. And Loava does it every day. She enters trance and passes souls.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. So when you all are doing your programs, and when you're working with people, if you're helping people, with a spirit situation at their home, do you do everything virtually, or do you all go in person to these places?
Virtually, actually. I mean, if it's convenient, we'll do local, but especially in the age of COVID, not going far. But it once again, it's our philosophy when it comes to this stuff of, we're not going to clear your house for you. It's, you're the one living there. You're the one, and as I say, you're a being of light living in a human body. You got to realize you have the power and authority to do this. You don't need priests. You don't need a hierarchy. You can do this yourself. You can set your boundaries.
Yeah, we explain how to do it. We really want people to be empowered in their house and knowing that they can do it. Yes.
So we're all about empowering, and then giving the person the tools to do it themselves and throughout their life, right? Teaching you to fish.
Yeah, of course, if there's really like persistent case, then that's another story. But usually, like, it goes smooth.
If it's just a regular haunting, it's like, look, you can deal with it yourself. If there's
anxiety haunting,
if we're talking Amityville horror or anything like that, then okay, fine. We'll help out. But because the big part too is that by being in a haunted house like that, right? Don't look at it as just a problem. Look at it as a growth opportunity, right? We don't want to take that away from you, to come into your own power, to realize I can deal with this haunting myself. I can interact with this spirit, come to an understanding or deal with it, and that empowerment that comes with it. We don't want to take that away from you.
Yeah, and then you feel also more safe in your house or anywhere you go. And then the encounters are not as intimidating that they used to be with the tools.
Interesting. So I have a question. Why do you all think it is that some people are much more prone to have paranormal experiences and sort of a connection with the spirit realm, and others aren't? Because I remember having friends as young as, grade school, high school, who said that they could constantly sense and hear spirits around them, and others that had, just a strong spirits would come visit them and kind of like bother them, almost like you're saying, like someone who doesn't know they're dead, or someone, and other people have nothing like that in their whole life. Why do you think that is?
It can absolutely be a natural skill that comes with you. I do want to note, though, that with enough training and enough working at, anyone can awaken these abilities, right? I don't want people to think, okay, you have to be born with it, right? But at the same time, it does tend to come easier to some people. It does go through family lines.
Because you didn't have the ability before to do shamanic journeys and so on.
I had to work at it.
Yeah, that's the thing. So the way we see it is more like you have people that are very left brain, very logical, that like structuring kind of their reality. Then this is more difficult for them, and also to let go. There's a big part of it is to let go, because when you want to be with the spirit world, you have to kind of hollow out, yourself to be kind of an empty bone, and so you can kind of having this flow inside of you, so you can have this connection, symbiosis with the spirits. Not everyone is comfortable with that, because they really have to put aside their critical mind, judgment mind, and just all the thinking going on. And so what I tell people when it's difficult for them to let go is, you can just make, instead of trying to kind of repulse the ego or repulse the thinking mind, I say just make deal with it. Make a collaboration with your ego. So you want to say, or your left brain, and you say, okay, I know you like to analyze. I know you want to make sense of everything. We're going to do that in like 15-20 minutes after the meditation session, after the shamanic journey. So you kind of put it aside, and then you say, okay, you will be back. You will be back. You will be able to analyze and do all the stuff you like. But right now, we go in the heart, okay? And we just go here and we analyze, and we not analyze. So we go in our intuition, in our soul, in our core, and we work, on a heart-based communication. This is what I say, it's heart-based communication. You talk with your soul, you sense with your soul, and you can use your body, all the senses. And that's something that people are not always aware, is that we think you have to see or you have to hear, but you can smell, you can touch, you can, there's feeling, there's little nudges. Sometimes it's even something like just a drift of wind that out of nowhere, a weird thing like a knock on the door, that sometimes you just brush off your shoulder and you're like, oh, I don't know, I probably hallucinated it. But then you can give the benefit of the doubt, and that's the first step, I think, when you're someone kind of skeptical or have not a lot of experience but heard a lot, and you're kind of unsure of your own experience. I say always give yourself the benefit of the doubt. That's always the first step, being like, hey, it might have been this, but it might have been something else too, when you cannot really find a reasonable, reason for what happened. And so that's just opening the door slowly to it.
That approach is very useful, right? Where it's like, okay, let me just have the pure experience. Let me get lost in actually just experiencing it, letting that channel be open. And then I'm going to engage in critical self-reflection afterwards, right? Yeah. As opposed to always trying to self-censor and look at these things while they're happening.
Yeah, right? Because, like a shamanic journey is really like a lucid dream. So you feel like you're there and you feel like you're kind of in control, but at the same time, there's a flow that is carrying you. And so there is a conversation with the spirits. It's not just like you receiving all this information. No, it is a conversation with them. So people are afraid when they are using their imagination to communicate with the spirits. And so let's say you receive, I don't know, an image of a forest, and then you're seeing the owl. And I'm on the owl team today. And then, and then you receive that and you see the owl coming in, and then what are you gonna do, right? So you're like, oh, I'm gonna towards, so I'm gonna wait, or I'm gonna say something to the owl, and then there's kind of an exchange. Okay, then the owls would do something, and you're kind of you're weaving together the experience. But a lot of people, they're afraid. They're like, well, I'm just is it just in my mind? It's just so no, it is a collaboration with them. And yes, and then what I wanted to say is I'm lost in my mind. I was saying that
The owl.
the owl, yes.
While you think about that, I will jump in with a bit of a metaphor for what you were saying there, which is that this kind of, in a shamanic journey, when you're interacting with the spirit world, right? Something that's happening, it's a lot like a Dungeons and Dragons session, in that, in D&D, you have the dungeon master, right? He's in charge, and he's, so you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. You're in control of your character, but he's controlling the whole scenario, right? And so the dungeon master, he paints the picture, right? You walk into this room, and there are 3 doors, and and there's a fire in the center, and sets the setting and all this. And you can very much look at that as the imagery that's coming from the spirit world, right? It's flowing into you. You're not constructing it. You don't have to think about it. But at the same time, there is, you have to respond to that, right? Because if you're interacting with the spirit world, then it's like, well, okay, I'm going to go and, open door number 1, right? And so you have to kind of construct that. You have to put out, you have to think about it, and you have to put that out into the experience. But then, after you say, well, my brave elf goes up to door number 1 and opens the door, right? And then, it's the dungeon master who then says, all right, and now behind door number 1 is a giant spider, and your game is over, right? So, but it's that back and forth, right? Yeah. And so, absolutely, in a shamanic journey like that, there's going to be parts that you feel like you're in control, because you have to choose your action. Okay, I'm moving towards this door, I'm moving towards this hallway or something, but then there's going to be parts of it that just kind of are flowing into you, right? And that's the dungeon master describing, and you're experiencing it. And so that is, but the key there then is to kind of just be open to that flow, to just allow the experience to come in, and then afterwards, okay, engage in the critical self-reflection, but enjoy the experience while it lasts.
Yes, I've found back what I wanted to say, and is that you tell your mind, you don't try to analyze when you dream, right? You're just living the dream when you're dreaming. And so you say, hey, after that, you can do an interpretation as much as you want. But now we're dreaming, we're in the, in the spirit world. So we just want the experience, we're fully in the process. There's, no judgment, no criticism, no nothing. We're just living it. And then after, so by saying that to people, it's helping a lot, lowering the expectation. People have a lot of expectation when they journey, and so we have to work through that, like lowering the expectation, being open to anything to happen as well. Yeah.
Wow, what an incredible and fascinating conversation, you both. This has been amazing. This depth of information and this dive into shamanism, I've never dove down like this before. I haven't heard this component of it. I've never heard such a rich and just in-depth way of explaining it. So thank you both so much for what you've created, because what I see you creating is really, again, people have these experiences and they don't know where to go. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know how to connect with someone that can, and it sounds like you're kind of a one-stop shop for somebody who's like, listen, I want to connect. I know it's there and I want to connect, or I seem to be connecting and I think I'm going crazy and I don't know what's going on, or something weird's going on at my house. They can come talk to you guys. I see this center is like this epicenter for people who are, because again, I think that more and more people are having these experiences and becoming aware that there's something so much more around us all the time. There's something to the synchronicities. There's something to these messages, spirit animals that we see, events that happen in our life, these catalysts and these big interruptions in our lives. So I just love what you both are doing. And thank you so much for being a team and speaking to this. And I'm really excited for where you all are going with this, because it seems like something pretty big.
Oh, so are we. We live and breathe it. We're very fortunate to have the Spirit World Center. We can just make it our entire lives, and it's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, we're very passionate. So we have so many projects. So yes.
Beautiful. So if people want to find you, find out about your projects, or work with you, connect with you, how can they do that?
So they can find our website at spiritworldcenter.com, and center is spelt the American way with ER at the end, even though we're from Canada. And let's see, we also have a YouTube channel. That's the Spirit World Center. We have videos and stuff on how to do things and how to do some basic techniques. And we also have the podcast. That's the Spirit World Center podcast. Not a very original title, but and that's available pretty much everywhere, Spotify and any kind of podcast player or depository. And
we have Instagram too.
We have our Instagram account.
Yeah.
That's spirit_world_center. And I think that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
We also have a Facebook page that we just put up again, and so it has a few people on it, but that's Spirit World Center on Facebook.
All right.
So
awesome.
Just look for the Spirit World Center on everything. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll have all those links in the show notes. So thank you both so much for being on the show and for sharing your incredible work and your stories, and for giving us such a broad and deep understanding about shamanism in ways that I definitely never knew. And I know that most of the audience probably haven't conceived of it this way. I think of shamanism, all I think is nature, connection with nature, relation with nature. I never really thought of it as, this broader ecosystem and consciousness and all of these things, this trance state. So thank you for introducing new concepts. It's always so important for people to be thinking in new ways, new regards. And I know that a lot of people are going to be reaching out and want to work more with you both.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Whitney.
It's been so much fun. So much fun. So thank you both. And I'll see you later on your show.
Absolutely. Yes, it's going to be a great one.
Okay. Thanks again.